A warm welcome to one and all in attendance. Am I audible? Hello, Gopal.
Yes, Pragdish, you're audible. Just check the chat for a minute and then we'll start so that we don't miss out on anyone else.
Sure,
Yeah,
sure.
guys, if you guys are facing any sort of an audio or a video issue, just refresh your browser once, then it should be good. It should be connecting. We'll just start in a minute.
Okay, great. So, hope everyone is safe and healthy. Uh, I'm Pragdish from the Orchestly engineering team, and I'm here to give an introduction on extension and how one could build an effective extension in Orchestly. Is my screen visible?
Yes, Pragdish, it's visible.
Yeah. So, great. We'll continue. So, what is an extension? So, extension are software components that can either add a set of custom features to Orchestly or integrate Orchestly with the third-party service. So, Orchestly's flexible approach to business management means it can support a wide range of industry-specific requirements, but no two business are exactly alike. For more user scenarios, extension can give or deliver robust functionality without requiring complicated manual customizations. So, for example, let's consider a simple onboarding process. So, we have already have an onboarding blueprint. Let's have a look. So, let's consider two stages. Say the document collection in progress stage and the IT setup initiated stage. If you examine carefully, these two stages require a certain set of checklists to be performed in order to move to the next stage. So, the need of an R is a checklist extension, so which is readily available in our marketplace. So, not every business will need a simple checklist, but some models require multi-level checklist. Depending on the need, user can pick and choose which functionality they want. They simply downloaded an extension and use it to extend its features. So, in this case, we have mapped document collection in progress with a simple checklist. As you can see, checklist for Orchestly is an extension built using one of our platforms. So we have mapped a simple checklist for the stage. and the IT setup initiated stage has been mapped with a multi-level checklist. This is also an extension built using a platform. So, why we need two different extensions serving the same purpose? The IT setup initiated stage not requires a checklist which is common but requires a series of checklists based on the designation of the candidate. Say, candidate might be a developer and his IT requirements would vary from a designer. So, we are done with the setup. Let's create a job for this process and see how this process goes. So, I've chosen my employee onboarding layout. So, let's say we are onboarding Kevin for an example. So, currently, the stages and candidate confirmed. We click on request documents transition where we choose the assignee to get the documents. Let's select Orchestly demo and save it. Now we have the document collection in progress stage where we have mapped the checklist extension which we have built and mapped in our blueprint. So now we click on the document received transition. Here what we see is also an extension which we have mapped and created in the blueprint. This is a simple checklist, and once you have checked the required items, you can click on save. Once you have saved, the chosen check items can be displayed in the bottom section of the job detail page, which is also a part of the checklist extension, which means this is also an extension. An extension can contain sub-widgets. That is, one extension can contain n number of functionalities in n number of locations. So in our case, this checklist extension contains three widgets. One, where we created the check items, which is in the blueprint section, and two, in the transition section, when we perform the transition, we had a pop-up. That is another widget. And third is the bottom panel or the bottom section. So let's move forward. So we complete our payroll setup, we perform the transition, and we move ahead. Now comes the stage where we have mapped a multi-level checklist. So the purpose of a multi-level checklist is based on the designation we want the checklist items to be performed. So a developer will have his own checklist items, a designer will have his own checklist items. So once we have checked the items, the transition would be moved to the next stage and the checked items would be displayed in the bottom section, as simple as the checklist. But the main difference here would be the purpose and the requirements where you want this checklist to be. So based on your own requirements, one can build your own extension and simply click on install and use the extension in Orchestly. So, what types of extension one can build using Orchestly? Building a native extension to extend Orchestly features is one type, and building an extension to integrate with third-party apps like, say, Slack for an example, Zoho projects, Google, or etc. for any other third-party services, you can build an extension. So let's look have a look on available locations where we can build our extension in Orchestly. So Orchestly supports 12 locations to build our extension based on our business needs. So out of which 6 locations are available in the job detail page itself. So let's have a look one by one. So these all are the available apps which is present inbuilt in our marketplace. So you can also build your own apps and publish it in our marketplace, or you can use it as private as well. So I'm about to show you the first location, which is called the job detail right panel. So for which I used one of our inbuilt apps called Harvest. So this location is called the job detail right panel, which is in the right side corner of the job detail page. So available apps from marketplace for this location is Harvest, which is a simple time tracking app. You can use it, which is readily available. So what are the extension one can build for this location? Say if our current job is mapped to any ticket in Zoho desk, we can pull those information and show in this location. Say if the job is mapped to an issue from projects, then you can pull those information. Or if a job requires lead information from Zoho CRM, you can pull your information and construct your own UI, and you can show it in the right panel. For any of these implementations or requirements which are similar to the stated requirements, can use this location. Let's move on to our next location. So which is called the job detail attachment pop-up. So this location is located in the attachment section of job detail page. So Google Drive. So available apps for this location in marketplace is Google Drive and Dropbox. So this is an sample extension which is built for this location. So what other apps you can build for this location? If a business requires files from Zoho Work Drive or SkyDrive or any cloud storage app, could use this location so that you could pull files from your third-party apps and map it to your current job as attachments. So this is all about this job detail attachment pop-up. So we'll move on to our next location, which is the job detail bottom panel. So we are pretty much familiar with this location, what we have shown in our checklist. So this location is used to create the extension as a section in job detail page. So available apps from Marketplace for this location are Checklist and Zoho Sign. So what are the extension one could build for this location? Any business requirements which needs to show Orchestly's native data in job details page as section, or any data from a third-party app to be shown as a section in job detail page could use this location. Let's move on to our next location, which is job detailed during pop-up. Job detailed during pop-up. This location is used to show a pop-up and transition button before performing and transition to the next stage. So this is that location. After the requirements of the transition is fulfilled, the stage is moved to the next stage. So available apps from Marketplace for these locations are Checklist and Zoho Sign. So you can build your own implementation after which you want to perform the transition as extensions. So what are the extension one could build for this location? Say I have a process where only after I complete my payment, the stage should be moved to the next stage. For this case, we can build a payment extension using one of our payment gateway apps available in Marketplace. For requirements, we need a custom action to be performed before moving on to the next stage. Could use this location. So we'll move on to our next location, which is called the job detail comment pop-up. This location is located in the comment section of job detail page. So it is in the form of a button. So once you click on the button, you'll have your apps rendering. So available apps from Marketplace for this location are Slack. So how does this work? So if I want to post my comment, say to Slack, I just click on the button. I have my Slack channel list. I choose my channel and just click on post. And your message has been sent to the respective channel. And here we go. We have the message. So what are the extension one could build for this location? If we require to post comments to any third-party apps like Slack, Click, Microsoft Teams could use this location. Our next location would be job detail action. So this location is located in the top corner along with the job actions. So available apps from Marketplace for this location are export field details. So this is an extension which is inbuilt. So if you want to download your field details as XLS or CSV files, could use this location. Or if you want to build your own custom implementation where you want the field details as PDF, or you want to template your field details and download it for custom implementation as such as those can use this location. I just click on export. I have my files downloaded. So this is also an extension built using this location. This is available for free in our marketplace. So now we move on to our next location. It's called the job.add. So for this location, I'll just show you how to build an extension. So I'll show you how to build an extension using this platform in our upcoming sessions. So right now I'm just going to create a sample app, this location called job.add. Okay. So now I click on run my extension. Run is used to preview your extension during your development, which I will cover in our upcoming session. So we are currently running our extension called job.add. So this location is used to redesign your job form. Say you don't want our job form, you want to customize it to your own business requirements, could use this location to build apps. Say, for example, if you want to show the job in the form of a wizard setup, you can do your own UI and custom implement and install the extension, and our inbuilt form will not load, rather your own form will be loaded. Or in the or if the job form requires data from a third party app to be shown, could also use this location and rebuild and redesign your own form and can use it. For requirements such as these, one could use this location. So, so there is something called enable developer mode, which you need to disable it, because while I am running my app in the preview mode, the whole Orchestly app will go into a sandbox where only the app which is running would be displayed. The installed apps will not be currently active. So you just disable the developer mode so that all the installed apps would run now. So we'll move on to our next location, which is job list.actions. So this location is located in the top corner along with the job list actions. So it would be somewhere here. So let's have a quick look how to build this extension. Say we'll just change the location to job list.actions, and I have my app here. So under app section, I will have my app listed over here. So what are the extension one could build for this location? So if we require any custom actions to be implemented, like exporting job list details as PDF or CSV or XLS files, could use this location. So we'll move on to our next location called the extension settings. So this location is located in the installed extensions detail page. So available apps from marketplace for this location is Zoho Sign. So this application setting is kind of an extension. Any extension which requires a settings page could use this location as its settings page. Currently the app is in the developer mode, so I'll disable the app. So we have the custom settings which we have built for Zoho Sign. So this is also an extension which is designed for this location. So we'll move on to our next location, which is called the blueprint detail during tab. We are also familiar with this location because we have used this location in our checklist app itself. So this is the location which I have stated called the blueprint detail during tab. So what are other extension one could build for this location? This location could be used as a supporting location for job detail during pop-up location, where we can collect data like checklist, where we create the checklist items for the pop-up in the transition, which acts as a supporting widget for the checklist. So we move on to our next location, which is the Orchestly settings. This location is available in the Manage Settings section in Orchestly. So, so what are the extensions one could build for this location? Extensions such as customized settings for Orchestly can be built in this location, or one can build and custom module in this location. So we'll move on to our next location, which is called the Orchestly header. So right now we see Zoho projects, which is an extension built using our platform. So this is the location which I'm talking about, orchestly.header. Extensions such as Zoho projects, for example, we see here is an extension which embeds the entire task page from projects where one could add or view tasks. Say, if I want to view my task, I can view my task from Zoho projects from Orchestly itself. Say, I want to add a task, I can simply add a task and my task will be added in Zoho projects. So implementations such as these could use this location. So likewise, extension which could be embedded as web tabs could be built in this location. Or if you want to build your own custom dashboard, say I want to build a custom dashboard in this location with with my own customized requirements, one could use this location and build his own custom dashboard. So these are all the locations available in Orchestly. We are done with all the locations in Orchestly. So we'll let's move on what are all the tools required to for building an extension. So the tool which is required to build an extension is called the Sigma. What is Sigma? Sigma is an extension development platform where developers can build and host extensions for various Zoho applications. Sigma is a common platform for developing extensions for, for various services, which is available for free for developers. Using Sigma, you can create two types of extensions. One is called the public extension, and two is the private extension. Public extensions are hosted for a wider audience, which will be listed in our marketplace. Whereas private extensions are restricted to a smaller circle. Say, I want my extension only within my org. You can use a private extension, or you can build your extension as a private extension. So, we'll see how to create an extension in the upcoming section. So, what all are the key features in Sigma? So, the key features in Sigma is the online cloud editor, where we can build our entire application on, the connections page, where we create our connectors with the third party apps. We'll see what is connectors, and we have something called triggers, which could be also used as a server side implementation. So, if your extension not only requires a client side application, if your extension requires something to be done on the server side also, we can use something called triggers, which could support your server side implementation. So let's now see how one could build an extension. So building an extension is pretty easy. You just click on new extension and create your extension. Say, so we have to fill in our name of an extension, give a description, and choose the service you are building your extension upon. So since Sigma is a common platform for Zoho where we can build our extensions, we can see the list of services. So we click on Orchestly and agree to our terms and conditions and click on save. Once we have saved, what we see now is the online cloud editor. So this is the editor used to build our required JavaScript and HTML files for our extension. By default, we will load the required the sample HTML and CSS and the files required for a sample widget. So this is called the plugin manifest file, which is the main file for building your extension. So we'll talk about what is plugin manifest in a couple of minutes. Say we have done creating an extension, we have loaded our default templates are all loaded. So our default template is called the Orchestly app HTML, which we saw earlier while running our app. Say we saw this template. This is a sample extension built using Zoho Sigma, which we saw earlier while running our app. This is the HTML which got rendered in Orchestly. So we have something called modules where we give the widget details and the locations we are building your extension upon, and the HTML to be loaded, and the name of the widget, and if the widget contains any logo or icon, you give all these details in widget section. So this section could have one or more than one widgets, which I showed earlier in our checklist, where our checklist had three widgets for three different locations. So we'll move forward and we'll try to publish this extension. So this is my extension. Once I have done with my development, I click on publish. So I can publish this extension as two types. I can publish it as private or public. So if I publish it as public, it would be submitted in a marketplace for approval. After giving few details, you'll have a form. After clicking public and publish, you'll have few forms. You have to fill in those forms and you will submit for the marketplace. And once it's submitted, it may take a week or two to get approval. Once it's approved, your extension would be listed in our marketplace. Anyone could install the extension and could use it. Or if I want to install this app or publish this app as private, I just click on private and publish. So have clicked on private and I have published my extension as private. Now, how to install this extension into my org? So once I install the extension or published my extension, I have something called installation URL in the extension detail page in Sigma. So I just click on the installation URL. So the URL would redirect to me to the organization page. So it will ask me for to which org you want to install your extension. Say I select Craftsman. So this is my first extension for Orchestly. So I'm going to install my extension. So during installation, you can also set your visibility. Say you want this extension to be visible only for few users, or if you want your extension to be visible only for certain teams or certain roles, you can do that as well. Right now I'm using all users. So if you want your extension to be visible only to certain layouts, you can do that as well. So you can select your layout which you want your extension to be visible. You can choose your layout. Right now I'm choosing all layouts and clicking on install. So I have created my first extension for Orchestly and I have installed my extension. So So here we can see our install extension where the default template is loaded and the app is installed. Now let's check what are connections in Sigma. So connectors are used to connect up our extensions which to third-party services. Why one requires connectors? Because if there is no connectors, every extension developer have to maintain user authentication flow by himself. With connectors, the authentication is handled internally and there is a less burden for our developers. So let's check on how to create and connect connections for our extensions. So I click on my connections page. I choose my service as Orchestly and choose my portal or org name. So once I have done it, so I can see this add connections button. I just click on it. So I can see a certain service which has been available for usage. So these service you can build connections for these service. If at all your service is not listed here, you can create a custom service and give a name and choose the type of authentication your service provides, and you can create your service and your connections. So let's see an example how to create to Google Apps or how to create a connection for Google Apps. So I have my Google service which is already listed by default. I click on my Google service, say I give a name Google Connector, and I select the scope for which I'm developing my extension for. Say if I want to develop an extension for Drive, I only use scopes for Drive. So for example, I'm choosing scope for only Drive apps. Say I have chosen my scopes. Once I have done choosing my scope, there's something called use credentials of login user. So if your connection or the connector requires org level authentication or a user level authentication. So if you click on this check button, your connector requires authentication from all single user. So every user of the org should authenticate the extension. Or if you create the connector as a global connection, say you can just uncheck this button and create your connection. Any admin from your organization could authenticate your connection, and not every single user needs to authorize your extension. In this case, we need a user level authentication since it's a drive fetching files from your Google Drive. Say I use credentials of login user, so every user has to have to authenticate your connection, and I just click on create and connect. So once I click on create and connect, it will ask you to authorize. I have already authorized, so it will asking me to reuse the connection which you have authorized. So I have done with my authorization, and what I will find is this JSON object. So this JSON object is the key for building an extension. So We require this JSON object to be included in the file called plugin manifest in the extension. Say, I will show our Google extension. Say, this is the file which I am talking about. Have this connectors object and I have given the connection details. So what we have to do is we have to just copy paste this connection JSON into this file called plugin manifest JSON under the key called connectors. Once it's done, Orchestly will understand that your extension requires authentication for the service. So this is about creating connectors for your third-party apps. So let's move on to another key feature called triggers. So why one requires a trigger for your extension? Say I'm building an extension for adding tickets to Jira. Say from Orchestly, if I add a job, I want the job to be added as a ticket in Jira. Or likewise, if I add a comment in my Jira application for a particular ticket, I want the comment to be added in my Orchestly. So for services as these require something called your server-side implementation as well, because client-side applications cannot have two-side communications. So in order to have a two-way communication, one requires something called triggers. Let's see how we can associate a trigger for an extension. So inside my extension detail page in Sigma, I have something called triggers. So these triggers, I have already associated a trigger called send mail when a job is created. I'm just clicking on edit. So this trigger would send a mail whenever a job is created in Orchestly. So this trigger uses a function called send mail. So your server-side implementation is written as custom functions in the section called functions. So so this is a function which sends mail to pragdish.k@zohocorp.com whenever a job is added. So what we have to do is just create your server-side implementation for the extension as functions and associate a function to a trigger and associate the trigger to an extension. In this way, one could add a server-side implementation in our extension as well. So this is where we create our functions. So we click on add a function. So I create my first function, and it's pretty easy to create your function because it's drag and drop kind of uh, implementation. You can implement your server side uh, implementation as a deluge script. So you can see the guide on how to build the uh, your server side implementation using the deluge script using our guide. So which will guide you how to create your server-side implementation for the extension as a deluge script. So these are the key features available in Sigma for building your extension. Let's check out on one of our extensions we have built and showcased earlier, which is called the Zoho Sheets, for an example, and check out how we built the Zoho Sheet, or the Google Sheet implementation for Orchestly, which Kevin had showed you the earlier part of the demo. Say, this is the extension that Kevin showed, which pulls data from your Google Sheet and displayed in Orchestly. So this file is called the plugin manifest JSON file, which uses the Google Sheet connectors. So I have created a connection for my Google Drive, which uses a scope called the spreadsheet scope, and my modules contains widgets. I have used only one widget, and my location is the job detail during pop-up, and I have given the name as product description, and I have an icon and the logo for this extension. And the URL here is the HTML which you have to render for this location. So whenever app loads in Orchestly, so the URL, this URL is where the HTML gets rendered. So if you want the URL to be relative, you can use the HTML files from your extension as a relative, or if you want an uh, if you want to embed from a third-party service, you can give your URL as absolute URL. In those cases, the URL will be loaded as absolute, and your extension files will not be loaded. So let's check. This is the HTML which gets loaded. So I have designed my own HTML. So what the app developer has to do is you have to include an SDK which is available for developing the extension, which is called the Orchestly Client SDK. So this is the SDK which I'm pointing out here, which has to be included in your HTML for developing the extension. So once you have included the SDK, you have to do something called initiate the SDK. So you have to initialize your SDK, after which your app could use the SDK APIs available for building the apps. So quickly move on to the guide, which gives you details on how to build extension in our developer space. So the step-by-step process of building an extension is described in this guide. So this is the SDK which I'm talking about to be included. So once you have done including this SDK, what one have to do is one have to initialize the SDK. So we have done something called Orchestly SDK.init. which is used to initialize the SDK, after which you can use our API is called. So if you want to get the username, you can use orchestly.get the username, and you have the name in your data. So likewise, you will have the step-by-step process on creating your extensions. So we'll move on to the JS SDK. So we also have something called configurations. So if your app requires any configurations before installation, you can just give this, or you can mention this in our plugin manifest file. Say that your app has something called configurations, so which is to be added before installation. Say, so in my plugin manifest, I will add something called config. So I'll simply show this with an example. So what I have, what I'm doing now is, so I've added my config, so array. So I'll just publish my app as private. So I've done publishing. So during my installation, I will have this tab called application configuration. So this configuration is what I'm mentioning, which we have given in our plugin manifest. I want a text to be collected from the admin or the user, which could be used in my extension. All this data could be collected here. So we have a text box, an email field, a password, a checkbox, radio button, drop down, number field, and a multi-level text box. These are all the fields available, which you could get the data as config, and you can design your configuration page from the plugin manifest. Here you can add what all are the configurations which the extension required, and those data could be collected during installation, and during the app or the extension rendering you can get back these data by simply calling our SDK method. Say I want the config data, so I just use this API called Orchestly SDK.get app configuration. I'll get this entire app configuration data which I have filled during installation. So you can see what all are the available APIs and the keys which could be used to the extension to get your required details. Say if you want to get a job blueprint which is currently running, you can use to orchestly.get job.blueprint id. You'll get the current blueprint ID on which the job is running. Say you want the job.current transition ID. During your transition pop-up, you can use this key called job.current transition ID, which would give you the current transition ID on which the transition is getting performed. Or you want the job.current comment text, which we have seen earlier with an example of Slack, where you want the current Slack current uh, comment value. You can use this key called job.current comment text. You'll get the current text. So if you want to get the attachments details, you can just use job.getAttachments API. Likewise, you can get the job details as well. So you can just use this API called Orchestly.get job details. We'll have your entire job details in this format. So you can check on all the keys which are in our documentation while building your extension. So now let's come into something called storage. So obviously an extension requires storage. So for this purpose, we have something called application property and the entity property. So we have two types of storage called the application storage and the entity storage. So what's the main difference between application storage and entity storage? So the application storage can be used where in cases like where after the user uninstalls the extension, you no need the data that the application has stored could use this API to store the value. Or else, say if I'm storing some value for extension, say checklist, so I'm creating a checklist items. So if I uninstall my app called checklist, all my created check items would disappear and the data will no longer be present in our database because we use application property. Whereas during performing a transition, we store something called the chosen check items. So those items are stored under property called entity property because those are related to the job. So we need those data. So even though I'm uninstalling my checklist app, I want to know what this app has done to my job as an entity. So those values will be existing as long as your entity also exists. In this case, job is an entity and I store the property as jobs entity. As long as the job exists, the value also exists. So let's go through how to set an entity property. So we can use this API called orchestly.set job.entity property. The key, you have to key value pair. So you have to give a key and the value, and it will be stored as a key value pair. So you can retrieve the data using orchestly.get job.entity property and the key you use to store the extensions property. Likewise, you can destroy the property using job.entity property destroy, and the value will be removed from the database. So let's go and check what is application property, and we can simply use Orchestly SDK dot store key value. This is also stored as key value pairs. And once we have stored the extension values, you can retrieve it by using Orchestly.retrieve, the key you used for storing the extension data. So you can also retrieve all the key value pairs you have stored for this extension using Orchestly.retrieve all, which would give you all the data you have stored for this extension. So this is all about extension storage. So currently we have this extension as default in our marketplace, which could be used. And I'll just show you an example how to install. You can just click on these items and click on install, agree to the terms and conditions. So you can just click on install. So we can make use of the pre-built apps which is available in a marketplace, or you can build your custom app and install it as a private extension. So you can enable or disable your extension whenever. If you're not using any extension, you can just click on disable, so your extension will not be available. Say the Zoho projects now is disappeared because it's no longer enabled. So you can just click on enable and disable, so that temporarily you want this extension to be disabled. You can just click on disable, and if you want to enable it again, you can just click on enable. Okay, so we have enabled our Zoho projects in extension. Now it's available for usage. I think I pretty much covered how to build an extension, and please post your queries if you have on building the extension and how one could build extension for your requirements. Thank you, everyone. I think I pretty much covered the topic on building an extension and what are all the available locations we have in Orchestly for build your extension. And we have built our own sample extensions using Sigma. Thank you. So I think we'll now have question and answering session. Avinash or Gopal, could you please come in? Hello.